Let's start again. King of iron, king of steel, heavy and hard is the heart of the king. Here it pounds like a hammer and nail. See how he rails against everything. But even that hardest of hearts unhardened suddenly when he saw her there. Lady Persephone walked in the garden, sun on her shoulders, wind in her hair, the smell of the flowers she held in her hand, and the pollen that fell from her fingertips. And suddenly Hades was only a man, his hat in his hand and a song on his lips. And he didn't know how, and he didn't know why, but he knew that he wanted to take her home. When he saw her alone there against the sky, it was like she was someone he'd always known. And the sun rose and fell in his chest when he held her. He felt the earth moving without and within, and there were no words for the way that he felt. So he opened his mouth and he started to sing. La 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 la. Come with the heart of that man. Now that the man is king, what has become of the heart of that man? Now that he has everything. More he has, more he holds, the greater weight of the world on his shoulders. See how he labors beneath that load, afraid to look up and afraid to let go. So he keeps his head low, he keeps his back bending. He's grown so afraid that he'll lose what he owns. What he doesn't know is that what he's defending is already gone. Where is the treasure inside of your chest? Where is your pleasure? Where is your youth? Where is the man with his hat in his hand, stands in the garden, nothing to lose?